Hello, my name is Galo Canizares, and I am an architectural designer, a writer, and digital artist. Today, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my art practice, as well as my upcoming project for GEN.ART called SOBEL. My background in art goes back to when I was a little kid. I was always interested in painting and drawing, and when I discovered painting software, it opened up a whole new world for me. I started using technology creatively, and I haven't stopped doing that since. When I was in college, I studied architectural design, and I pursued that through my master's as well and became a professional architectural designer. I practiced architectural design for a couple of years, and then I established my own practice so that I could have a little bit more control over the projects that I worked on, and I worked on developing my voice as a designer a little bit more. At the same time, I also started teaching, and that's really where I began exploring a little bit more academic pursuits in terms of the history of architecture, and specifically the history of architectural instruments and tools. So that applies to things like the software that we use today, as well as any other sort of drawing instruments that are involved in the production of architecture. Today, I am an assistant professor of architectural design at the University of Kentucky's College of Design, and I focus on teaching courses on visualization and representational media. I first discovered generative art in grad school when I was exposed to the history of architectural software. There are some really interesting overlaps in the history of advanced architectural drawing tools and the kind of creative endeavors that some computational designers were working on in the 1960s and 70s. And I always thought that the overlap between computation, computational design, digital art, and architecture was a fascinating world, and that piqued my interests both as an artist but also as an academic. And so my research really focuses on unpacking the relationship between the tools that we use to express ourselves creatively and produce the built environment, as well as the sort of latent expression that comes with this new world of computational entropy, the digital color theory, and real-time animation. My work as an academic and as an artist are separate, but they do share some related interests. For example, while I'm researching from an academic point of view the history of architectural software and painting software, for example, I'm also, as an artist, developing my own software and software-based artworks. So there's a direct correlation between what I research and how I express myself creatively. In terms of the artwork that I've been producing strictly for NFT platforms, they are primarily animated paintings. And these animated paintings are built with either JavaScript or with processing or other programming languages. The content of these types of works is mostly animated paintings. They're two-dimensional artworks that explore the materiality of the screen and try to push this idea of exploring the pixel as a medium. I think sometimes we take for granted the amount of pixels that we are exposed to every day and the subtleties of things like RGB colors, RGB LEDs, and the whole slew of infrastructure that comes along with digital screens and digital artworks. And so my work is really interested in teasing out some of those ideas that we kind of take for granted, or some of those infrastructures, and really putting them on display so that we can look at them from an aesthetic point of view, but also a sort of latent, expressive entropic world of lights and movement and all of the kind of traditional ways of looking at art. I'm really inspired by artists that work in both traditional mediums as well as new technologies and computational mediums. I think that programming languages and code allow us a really interesting balance between potentials and constraints that maybe things like Paint do not allow for. Or to put another way, I think that digital and computational mediums allow us to explore different limits and potentials than analog media. And so my interest in the material of the pixel, the material of digital color, for example, really goes deep into those constraints and tries to do, for example, the most expressive composition with the least amount of colors. That's one of the ways that I approach constraints. I also approach composition and animation and real-time processes from the point of view of structure. I think that maybe comes from my architectural background, but I'm really interested in things like perfect loops, the structure of controlled chaos, and a lot of other important, significant algorithms that are related to computation-specific processes. My work focuses a lot on image processing algorithms. I've been diving into the history of image processing that goes back to the 1960s and 70s and looking at how technologists and software developers have established the rules for dealing with pixels and dealing with screens and trying to create painterly effects with these blocky light elements. And so a lot of my work really dives deep into specific algorithms. SOBEL is an exploration of an image processing technique called the SOBEL operator or SOBEL filter. The SOBEL filter is named after a person named SOBEL that developed this algorithm, but it's an image processing technique that allows you to take the contrast in an image and detect edges in any sort of pixel-based raster image. And a SOBEL operator is used in so many different applications, from machine vision type of applications to simple image processing on things like Photoshop. And this simple little algorithm is so pervasive that I thought it would be really interesting to explore it as purely an aesthetic effect. And so SOBEL uses a lot of different algorithms in it, from noise algorithms to feedback structures, but the edge detection algorithm is really what gives it the character and really what gives it almost the comic book-like or drawn effect. But it doesn't pretend to be an analog medium. It actually capitalizes on the fact that it's made up of low-resolution, chunky pixels and puts those front and center as the main effect. For the collection, I really hope that collectors and viewers really look at all of the details and look at how the limited color palettes actually work together to produce layered effects. It is very much a filter-based operation, and so I would really love anybody that views some of the real-time animated pieces to zoom in and try to unpack all of the different layers that are happening and being manipulated in real time. My favorite part of the underlying code of SOBEL is the looping algorithm. I think it's really fascinating to produce something that looks and feels endless, because infinity is a core component of digital design. And I think sometimes when we produce objects in virtual space, we think that that space is limitless or that it's endless or infinite. You know, there are a lot of mathematical concepts about infinity, and the idea of something being endless or limitless is super fascinating to me. And so implementing that in the artwork was something really fun to do. I like to produce perfect loops to, again, capitalize on this idea of limitless or infinite video that is a fundamentally kind of digital phenomenon. I would really love to show this on, you know, huge screens and have it play forever, because it repeats itself infinitely. And I hope that collectors really appreciate that aspect of it. My plans for this collection are really open. I love to print out my artworks. I really like to translate my artworks into different mediums, and especially artworks that really focus on the materiality and the texture of the pixel. Printing out pixels might seem a little bit silly, but I think it's really interesting to translate something that is meant to be seen on a screen to something on paper, and thinking about what is involved in that process of translation and what do you get at the end when you translate a pixel from the screen to paper, for example. I've also made screen prints of previous projects. It would be really interesting to try to replicate the screen printing process for an artwork like SOBEL that's really dense in terms of the chunky pixels. So I have no real plans right now, but it would be really interesting to try to experiment with translating the outputs of SOBEL into other mediums. For aspiring artists and computational designers, architects, painters, I really only have one piece of advice, which is to keep making work. That's the way that you get better, and that's the way that you really find your own voice. And I like to make a distinction between style and voice when it comes to practices. I think that a lot of the times people maybe get a little bit too caught up trying to find a distinguishing style or trying not to copy somebody else's style. But if you look at it from the point of view of voice, which I would characterize as your own expression, your own interests, and your consistency in expressing those ideas, I don't think anybody can really steal that from you or copy it very well. And so I think artists should really focus on finding their own voice. And in my opinion, the best way to find your own voice is to just keep making work and keep practicing. It's like the phrase goes, practice makes perfect. So I just wanted to thank the whole team at GEN.ART for the opportunity to present SOBEL. I think that it's a really interesting project, and I hope that you all like it. Thank you very much.